Hey, what's up guys? It's Spencer with Reversion Raceworks. This is going to be a long format video on how to swap from your analog gauges to our Holley 12.3 mount. So this is obviously for the 88 to 94 OBS Chevy full-size trucks. And we just released a Holley 12.3 Pro Dash kit. So we'll go through disassembly first, and then a little bit of how we made the design, and then finally how to install the dash that we made. So first things first, if you haven't disassembled one of these dashes before, they're pretty easy and it only takes a couple of minutes. The first thing that you're going to want to do is disconnect these 4 screws here. They look like this, and they've got a T20 screw there. So just use a driver and pull out those 4 screws. As I mentioned, for this video, I've removed all the screws already just to save time for the disassembly process. So once you've got those done, this bezel will simply pull out of place. And there's 2 spring clips on top, so I kind of like to pull here and here when I'm removing it from the dash. Not pictured here, but some trucks have fog lights or defog, wipers and stuff like that are over here, as well as your headlight and dimmer switch. So when you first pull this bezel off, you're going to want to reach your hand around and disconnect all that stuff and get it out of the way. I find it's a little bit easier to kind of shimmy this out of the way if you take the gear select lever and put the key in, put it all the way down to low. But keep in mind, if you're doing that, don't do it on a sloped surface. Make sure your parking brake is set, and obviously chalk the wheels so that the truck doesn't roll away from you. Cool. Once you got the bezel off and out of the way, you're going to start by removing the air duct here. So that's simply held on with 1 screw. And for pretty much all the screws on the dash, they're a 7mm. So I just use one of these, or you could use a driver if you got one. It makes it disassembly super easy. So 1 screw here, and this simply wiggles up and out of the way. Once you got that out of the way, it's time to do the HVAC and the radio. So you'll remove the 4 screws for the HVAC, disconnect the plug at the back, and now this is ready to come out. Once that's out of the way, same thing with the radio. You got 4 screws here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You pull those, and then the radio will release from the dash. And I'm just going to leave that hanging out here out of the way. And you can see now we're already most of the way done. 1, 2, 3, 4 screws, and then the OEM cluster is going to come out. Don't forget you've got your gear select cable here that's going to attach to the column shroud. So that's a little spring clip. You're going to make sure that you remove that. Don't pull that or else you could break the selector here. Sweet. That bad boy is out of the way. And now we're ready to install the dash. So here's the Holley 12.3 Pro Dash. How we designed this was we obviously went to a junkyard and got a dash to start taking measurements off of. And we also used the OEM cluster and modeled that in CAD. It was really important that we had all the designs perfect so that we can get that OEM fit and finish that we're looking for. So we modeled the dash, got the exact curves, and then modified it to fit the 12.3. The 12.3 mount is pretty slick. It matches the OEM cluster as far as mounting holes go, so you don't need to modify the dash at all. And then the Holley 12.3 simply mounts to it using the 6 screws as supplied by Holley. It's got all the cutouts you need for your USB, GPS, and obviously the main harness here. And we even have pressed in standoffs here so they clear the head of the screw so you don't have any issues with assembly. It's an 1/8 inch thick aluminum and powder coated in a beautiful wrinkle black finish right here. So it looks super good and it's going to be really, really rigid. Rigidity is super important for this as well, because you'll notice that the factory has 4 mounting holes, while we're only going to be able to use 3 of them because you can see the Holley screen shrouds this top left one. In my experience in using this, the 1/8 inch aluminum and the screen adds a ton of rigidity, and we've had no problems with that as far as the screen vibrating goes. So once you're ready to install it, you can remove the OEM cluster plug from here, and then you can feed out whatever your Holley harness wire is here and other peripherals that you're running. It fits right through. You don't need to cut that, which is super nice. And then you're ready to just clip that on to the back of the dash, and that's good to go. Next thing you're going to want to do is simply slide this into place. And like I said, you're going to use 1, 2, and 3 bolts right here. Cinch those down and you should be good to go. As you can see, it was a super tight squeeze in here. This one took us a couple tries to get right, but we're really happy with how it came out. Once you got the dash in, you can get the radio going. So the radio will go back into place. And if you haven't seen, we make a radio replacement panel. So if you're upgrading to a Holley, this would be a good time if you want to upgrade to getting rid of this OEM radio and then putting in a Holley 3.5, 2 1/16 inch gauge, or just a block off plate. So you can check that out on our website and then get your HVAC going back in here as well. Before you put that air duct back in, you're going to take the second part of our assembly here, which is a carbon fiber 3D printed shroud. And what this does is it makes up the space that's going to be over and on the sides of the dash that would normally be filled with an analog cluster. We really like to make this stuff plug and play with minimal cutting or modification required. So for this one, all you have to do is loosen these top two screws, slide it into place, and that's really it. These are notched, so there's a little bit of adjustment because I know these dashes kind of warp over time. So you can keep them a little bit loose, adjust it so that you get a parallel line on the top of your dash, and it looks really pretty. And that's it. So now once that's in there, you're ready to grab the ducting, put that back in there, put your 7mm screw back in there, make sure everything's tight, sitting the way you want it to. And then the last thing that requires modifications is the only modification that's required for this entire dash. Are two cutouts on the cluster bezel faceplate here and here. This is required because the height of the Holley screen here is too high and it'll interfere with the bezel plate right here. This cut ends up being about 2 inches in length and about 1 inch high. I used an angle grinder, 4.5 inch angle grinder with a cutoff disc, and I snuck up on it. So I took a little notch, test installed, a little bit more of a notch, test installed, so on and so forth until I got the good fit and finish that I wanted. And then once you got that all good to go, take those wires for your connectors, headlights, fog lights, whatever, plug all that stuff back in, and then you're ready to install the faceplate just like that. Boom, 4 screws go back in, and that's it. Now I've got this on a test rig here, so I'll turn on a simulated ignition source. And as you can see, a beautiful Holley screen boots up. You've got a full field of view here. It's a beautiful display, fits this truck perfectly. And now you're gonna have one of the coolest OBS trucks on the market. Enjoy.